Mind small town roots with business savvy, and you've got the Rural Rundown podcast. We're sharing our marketing and branding strategies, tips, and tricks that rural businesses can use to educate, inspire, and entertain their customers, and to help you make sales and hit profit goals. So what does it take to go from your mom is your only fan to famous in a small town? Tune in and listen up as we feature business owners and organizations that are doing big things in their community and creating opportunities for generations to come. So we just had an awesome conversation with Jason Medows, also known as Ag State of Mind. If you follow him on Instagram or you listen to his podcast, we talk a lot about mindset, and we kind of follow up from that conversation we had in our last episode, which I edited today. And Rachel, in your intro, you're like, I feel some type of way about the new year. So how are you feeling today? What is it like today?
Things are better, I guess. I can't believe, I feel like I should never do this in our intros because it like dates us and then it comes out later. But like as of recording this, we're at January 11th, which it just feels so strange to me to think we're close to the mid-month already. You guys, this is like time stops for no one, obviously, but it's just, I was telling you when we first popped on, I kind of feel like I'm getting into like where I'm running again and things are picking up. So I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing well. And I, you know what? I love that we ask each other this at the beginning of every episode, because like, it's just a nice little check-in. We are far away in the nation on the map. And these are kind of the only times that we get to check in with each other. But it also like leads me into today's conversation about mental health and talking about mental health. And you say something great in this podcast where it's like, if you have a brain, then you have mental health. Like, here's like ways to kind of like pay attention to it. And today's conversation with Jason of Ag State of Mind was just so good. I don't know. I liked it. And you kind of shared some thoughts too.
Like I said, I'm intimidated by this topic because I don't feel like I have any knowledge on it. So I don't even know how to talk about it. That's like just legit how I feel. So it's like, it's so nice to know that there's a resource out there very specialized to the rural community that like, if this is something you're like, I know I need to look into it, or I'm feeling these ways, I don't know what it means, because you don't know how to talk about it or communicate about it, like that he's there and he has a lineup of podcasts you can listen to is, I don't know. I just think that's pretty cool. Now that you heard that little snippet of what I didn't know we were going to record, but I think it really fit for this podcast, we're going to jump in and talk to Jason of Ag State of Mind.
Tell us a little bit about your podcast. How long have you been doing that?
So I'm trying to do the math in my head, and it's been about 2.5 years, I think. This was the 120th week of the podcast. So yeah, a little over 2 years, I guess that would be. It's been a little over 2.5 years. It's been a really incredible, cool journey where I've gotten to interact and meet with so many people. It's opened up so many opportunities for me, and not just me, but like, and I think that's what the cool thing about it is. It's allowed for kind of a community to grow around it. A community that's kind of centered on the podcast, but the more so centered around the ethos of the podcast, which is trying our best to make rural America healthy. It's been a really fun thing for me to do, to kind of integrate my two lives as one, as a rural healthcare provider, and as a ag producer. That's just like, as far as I'm concerned, that's like the best of both worlds, kind of getting them to meet there and trying to bridge the gap a little bit.
For sure. And can you tell us a little bit about your area, like where you live? I don't think I've ever been to Missouri before.
Oh, you're missing out. To me, and I'm biased, obviously, because I've lived here my entire life, but I've been other places. obviously, but it's my part of Missouri is, to me, the best part of the country to live in. We're in the Ozarks, the northern Ozarks, so very hilly, very almost, they call them mountains, but it's not really mountains. It's very, very hilly here. I always say I'm 2 hours from everything, as far as, a major metropolitan area. So close enough, but also far enough away that we know what we know that we're not in the city. You know what I mean? But yeah, I love it here. I'm outside of Cuba, Missouri. Actually, where I live right now is about less than 10 minutes away from where I grew up. I'm actually living on a farm that my dad purchased in the 80s. So yeah, I'm very close to family. All my family is within probably 15 miles of one another. We just love it here. We run quite a few cows. Yeah, it's just ideal country in my opinion.
For sure. Everybody always says oh, this is God's country, wherever they grew up.
Yeah, but everybody else is lying except for me. I'm the only one telling the truth.
Oh, I like that. Cool. Well, maybe just tell us a little bit about your day job and what you kind of do there.
Sure. Yeah.
And how you kind of came to be in that position.
So I'm a pharmacist. I actually work in my position is very unique in the fact that I work in a hospital, but I am an outpatient pharmacist that services the employees of our healthcare system. So you have to be an employee or a family member of an employee of the healthcare system to use our pharmacy. It's essentially a closed door pharmacy. There's about 2,000 people that work for the healthcare system. So it's a very unique it's a very unique situation, very unique work as far as pharmacy jobs go. There's very few of what we have, but it's really enjoyable because I get to interact on a different level with healthcare providers. You get to know the doctors, especially on a much different level, because you're very accessible to them, and I really like that. Whenever I was in school, I really enjoyed the clinical aspect of pharmacy, but I wanted the patient interaction of an outpatient retail setting. So again, it's kind of goes back to this is the best of the both worlds there. I work 7 to 3:30 Monday through Friday, no holidays, no weekends, no on call, none of that. It's just 40 hours a week in a pharmacy, but it's something I really enjoy, and not only do I enjoy my job, but I enjoy the life it allows me. It allows me to have a good sized cattle operation still and be able to still give each one of those the appropriate attention that they deserve.
Can you kind of tell us how you transitioned then into your podcast and everything you're doing? What kind of inspired that and how do they connect?
Sure. So I left where I grew up I kind of fibbed a little because we're closer than 2 hours to St. Louis. We're about an hour and a half from St. Louis. So that's where I went to pharmacy college, was in St. Louis, which was only about 100, less than 100 miles down the road, but it may as well have been 1,000 miles away. That's how different things were. And, I struggled with that a lot. I think I struggled with my identity a lot whenever I was in college, because I felt like I tied up my identity to kind of being that jock in high school, like I was, and I realized pretty quick that was no longer me. Whenever I went to St. Louis, I was always did really well in school, but then I quickly realized that I was no longer the smart kid anymore. So that was it was a very humbling transition experience for me, moving to St. Louis. So it was, it took its toll on my mental health, but it also gave me an appreciation for rural America. for my rural living. Obviously I love rural America. It's my, it's home. So, I mean, as soon as I went to college, I couldn't get back home fast enough. I took a job upon graduation, I took a job at a rural hospital where I work today still. I met my wife there. All of my kids were born in that hospital. It's very important to me. And then to back up a little bit also, as far as the connections, there's a lot of connections here, and I hope that I don't overdo it here and over explain things, but all of it's vital to me. And the entire backstory is vital. Whenever I was in college, my second year of college, my dad helped me get a first-time farmer's loan from Farm Service Agency, and I bought my first herd of cows with that back at home. I was still close enough where I could come home on the weekends and help Dad. In turn, he helped me with the cows while I was at school. Just a really cool experience for me. Because even go back even further, whenever I was in high school, I had no intention of staying here. Like I thought I'd be in the city. I just did. I didn't think that I would come back here. And gosh, it just didn't take a week at school to realize how much I missed it. So to tell you about buying that herd of cows when I was in college, maybe even indirectly, but my professional life and the life of agriculture were intertangled from the very, very beginning. So fast forward, I graduated college, moved back to the rural area, but I still didn't have something that tied my professional life and my agricultural life together. But in 2019, I found we had a tractor fire, and I was in Dallas at a conference with my wife, and my son calls me and says the tractor's on fire. And, that was just such a stressful thing. And what do you do about that? I'm hundreds of miles away from home. How am I going to manage this? And, I talked to him on the phone. The tractor burned up. I mean, obviously it was a bad deal, but nobody was hurt. Everybody was fine. But after it was all over, I realized I had gotten a lot better. I'd struggled with anxiety, and, this is something that would have sent me into a tailspin not too long before. But I realized that I had gotten better, and I realized that there were likely people who struggled like I have. And then I realized, man, I really have a unique perspective on these things. Being a ag producer, struggling with my mental health, but getting better, but also having a connection as a rural healthcare provider. And, I realized it was on that 8-hour trip home from Dallas where I talked to my wife, and I said, I want to help people. I want to do something. I want to have a mission. I want things to mean more. And that's where the idea of a podcast came. And, nobody knew less about podcasting than I did in July of 2019. I promise you, I knew how to find them on my phone, and that was about it. But thankfully I had the idea. I reached out to a couple of people who, I cannot express my gratitude enough to these people. Clay Conry of the Working Cows podcast. Did I see one of you? Somebody's from South Dakota, right? Is that right? Did I see that?
I went to college in South Dakota. Oh yeah, Rachel's from there.
Yeah, see, Clay's from South Dakota. He's been such a help to me. Tim Hamrich, who has the Future of Agriculture podcast, another person that I reached out to both of them. I didn't really know either one of them very well, but now I know them both very well. And, they didn't have to help me, but they did. And they helped me get my, kind of get my feet on the ground with, what to buy, mics, setup, software, how to even publish podcasts, the whole thing. It was just, I'm just so grateful because they helped me so much. And for me, not knowing anything, and I'm not very tech savvy, compared to my, at that time, 14-year-old son. I think it's proof enough that, like, if you have an idea, if you have a vision in your head, no matter how daunting or impossible it may seem, you should do all you can to go for it, because you don't know who's going to help you and what you might learn along the way.
And one thing about the podcast community that I've found, they're just like everybody's so willing to help. Like,
yes,
there is no competition. Like,
no,
it's just
it's
a brotherhood.
Exactly. It's too vast for it to be like, for people to be so competitive, like you say. It's not like we're competing, like, oh, if you listen to their podcast, you can't listen to mine, and vice versa. And no, we want, because I think what the thing about the podcasting community that is so special is everybody knows the struggles and everybody knows the challenges very intimately. And I think that they see themselves in everybody else, and they don't want other people to struggle like they've struggled. And they want to do all they can to make sure that some people can learn from their mistakes.
Yeah, I love podcasts too, especially if I'm going for like a long drive. It feels like you have a passenger in your seat, like you have somebody there next to you. So then when you find a podcast that can hit so close to home, or talk about things that like you might be struggling with internally, to hear somebody else say it is like, holy crap, I've been feeling the same way. Like, I didn't know anybody else was feeling that.
For
like,
sure. Yeah.
There's something about podcasting that I love so much that just makes me be like, okay, like, yep, that makes sense, or that makes me feel seen, or whatever. Like, it's definitely like an excellent community. We've learned that too in the last, like I said, just a year that we've been doing it.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's just incredible. Just, there's so many just resources. There's so many just people that are willing to help. It's just, it's wonderful. So
how did you feel like, I want to talk about mental health, or I want to talk about your mindset? Because I think that's something. I grew up in Southwest Wisconsin, and where I grew up, it's something that people don't talk about. And even when people are struggling with mental health or things are happening, it's kind of like, well, you know what's going on, but you never talk about it. You don't have a conversation about it. So how did you decide to be like, that's what I want to make a podcast about?
Because I knew that there was this unwritten kind of, like, there was this like below the surface problem kind of brewing. It was the elephant in the room in a lot of places, and some people like would have the story where, like, well, this happened in my family, or this happened in my town, this happened in my group of friends, and that's what caused me to want to do this. And it wasn't like that for me. I think I saw how important it was to myself. And like I said earlier, I knew that I wasn't alone. I couldn't be alone. I knew people had to struggle like I struggled. And I think, honestly, it started out as more a therapy to me, and, trying to get my own help. Right. Trying to seek out things that would work for me. And then it's so fast, it evolved, and so many people were talking about these things. And then we had COVID happen, and, it was just like, it was I don't want to say the perfect time for it, but I think the podcast, a podcast of that nature was very needed. Believe what you will, but I believe it was divine intervention. I believed it was done for a reason. I believe I did it for a reason. I acted on the prompting for a reason. And just being able to, just knowing that you help somebody, no matter how many people. And that's another thing about going back to, we talk about podcasting. You don't have to reach hundreds of thousands of people for it to be meaningful with a podcast. You've just got to help one person for it to be worth it, in my opinion. and I think in a lot of people's opinion. And just knowing that I can help somebody on such a deep level just makes it worthwhile.
Yeah. When we decided that mental health kind of mindset was going to be our topic for this month, I won't lie, it kind of intimidates me because I feel like my experience is the same as Brenna's. Like, you know that it exists and you're supposed to like be healthy mentally, but I feel like so many of us don't know what it means.
Yeah.
And then like I've literally Googled before, like, how do you improve your mental health? Because
there was no class in high school about it, right? You know, I mean, there's no, it's just, and then that's another thing. Go back to the beginning of the podcast. Whenever I didn't know what mental health was. I thought mental health equaled mental illness, right? I thought we were going to talk about depression, anxiety, suicide, all those things. And those things are very important to hit on, but we have to consider that mental health exists on a spectrum. Every single one of us exists somewhere on that spectrum. We all have mental health and we all need to take care of it. And we're all at different places on the mental health spectrum at any given time. And you can ebb and flow in that. And I think that's one of the earliest things I learned about the podcast, about mental health through the podcast is, I mean, we all have it. We all have to pay attention to it.
I saw a billboard yesterday, I think, that's literally, or a couple days ago, that literally said, if you have a brain, you have mental health. And I thought that was so funny. And then like getting to talk to you, I'm like, that's so interesting, but it's true. Yeah.
You know, and I talk about, this is something I say in my talks a lot, is, you know, when you go to the doctor, who gets their blood pressure checked? Everybody. Even, you know, like, and I always pick out somebody in the crowd that I am pretty sure this never has happened to, and I say, hey, you get your blood pressure checked when you're at the doctor? And they say, yes. I said, well, have you had a heart attack? And I said, well, no. I said, but you still get your blood pressure checked, right? And he said, yeah. And that's, you know, that's kind of that's how we have to start looking at it. Like, we have to look at mental health from a proactive and preventative type standpoint, then, because with no matter what other health condition it is, we look to preventing a crisis. We don't wait for the crisis to pay attention to whatever the problem might be. We have maintenance things and steps to hopefully catch it before it gets to the crisis mode. And growing up, and for a lot of years, I mean, honestly, really until recently, there's been no mental health maintenance education. You know, we're just taught to tough it out, sweep it under the rug. You know, that's not always helpful.
No. And I want to talk about like when I feel like I could go so many ways, but even 2 years ago when you started your podcast to now, I feel like I've seen, and maybe you have too, or is it true that what I'm seeing, this transition of people who are like, we don't talk about it, like we don't bring it up, we don't whatever, we know it's there, it's kind of the elephant in the room, to now being like, I see a therapist and it's okay and I'm going to talk about it, or I take pills and I'm going to talk about it. And are we getting better at talking about it? Is it more people being like, hey, me too? Like, what's happening? What are we seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing so many people talk about it and so many people just normalize it. You know, and I think what's great is like you hear people, and I was just at a conference this weekend where I spoke, and to have the number of people that like say they enjoy it that I didn't expect. You know, I'll just give you the example. There's this guy, I was at the Missouri Cattlemen's Convention, and I was sitting down, or I was in the middle of my talk, and there was this guy with cowboy hat, big, and he's probably in his 60s, last guy on earth you would think for this kind of stuff resonates with. And I saw him just nodding along. Then we sat down next to each other later in the day, and he said, man, I appreciated that. And he started talking to me about mental health and all this, that. And, you know, so I think we have this kind of these unrealized expectations of what we think people resonate with, or what we think they won't resonate with, or what they think. But I think if we really get out there and just actually talk about it, we'll be very surprised at who it resonates with. Like I said, I never would have thought somebody like that. And, and he's just one example. There's several people in previous times that I've talked that it's like, yeah, they really love to hear this stuff, and they realize how important that it is. So to answer your question, we are definitely getting better. We're not as good as we could be, obviously, but it's definitely, especially in the last couple of years, it's really gotten better.
I like the normalizing it phrase, just even because like you said, everybody has a brain. If you have a brain, you have mental health. Like everybody has it. So now we're just doing better at talking about it. It's funny that you bring up things that happen in our hometowns, or things that make us think differently about mental health. But I was scrolling your podcast to see who you'd had on there. Mm-hmm. And Jeff Ditzenberger and Brittany Olson were both people you had who they did a documentary about mental health in farming, and my neighbor was in that documentary, and my dad remembered saying checking in on him, being hey, how's it going? And after he was able to get some help and stuff, he was it was just my mind telling me things, that obviously weren't true. We would be over there and we would just say, hey, how are you? And he's I know you meant well, but when you left, I would think that you had it out for me. You wanted to come after me. You wanted to whatever. And that's what his brain was telling him. And I was that made me just feel for all of my neighbors, for everybody, you never know what somebody's struggling with ever. And you could be totally fine on the outside. And I think it's just so great that we in rural America we have a lot of stuff going on. We're being stewards of the land. We're being stewards of livestock. A lot of things depend on us. To be able to talk about the stressors of that is amazing. I love this movement of being able to talk about it more, because I think it's so needed.
It is so needed. And, the way that you kind of, somebody put it to me, framed it to me in this style, and it really has hit home for me. And you have to start seeing yourself as an asset. You have to start seeing yourself if you're not functioning, then nothing else can function properly. So many of us are, I don't have time to take care of myself. I have to take care of so many other things. Well, what I'm trying to do is reframe that, and that, no, you have to take care of yourself first so you can better take care of those things. It doesn't, you look at it like you would almost like a flow chart. And if you cut off the line up here at the top, none of this stuff is going to get taken care of. So you got to take care of the most important part, just like at the heart. The heart, take it back to the body. If you have a blockage in an artery in your heart, the whole thing shuts down and nothing else gets blood and you die. So if you can take care of that heart, if you can take care of whatever blockages are in that heart, or make sure there are no blockages, the whole body is going to be better supplied with blood. And, obviously that is going to make everything else function better. So, there's countless analogies for how you can look at this, but, taking care of the main aspect, and in this case, it is our own human health, that makes everything else function better.
So what are ways that we can take care of our mental health? What are some of those things that we can do, as business owners, as we're running these operations? Yeah. How can we take time for ourselves, or how can we kind of strengthen that help?
There's a lot of things, but there's two things that I think are very always stand out to me when somebody asks me this questions. And I have two rules. I have a rule of 5 and a rule of 2. And my rule of 5 is, if something's not going right, if things just seem to not be flowing for you well at all, whether it be in your business, with a livestock operation, nothing's cooperating, nothing's happening the way it should, you can take a break. And that break can last anywhere from 5 minutes to 5 hours to 5 days. But you'll find that the time that you take away is going to improve the productivity on the back end much more than you would have if you would have just pushed through and not taken that break at all. It goes back to having that maintenance on yourself, having, you got to fill the truck up with gasoline. You have to take care of yourself to function for the long term. We talk about being sustainable. Sustainable is a huge buzzword. Well, there's nothing to talk about sustainability. You have to run a business on sustainable effort. A guy on the podcast very early, Dave Pratt, he was the CEO of Ranch Management Consultants, who ran the Ranching for Profit schools. And he is very famously known for saying that you can't run a sustainable business on unsustainable effort. And if you're going all the time and things are not working out and you're just driving yourself insane, it doesn't seem very sustainable to me. So trying to maintain a steady, sustainable effort at any given time, but also being able to take some time away from it, to look down the line, it's super important. And then it goes on to my next rule, which is my rule of twos. And that has to do, I look at it from my relationship with my wife. I think we are so busy. We have multiple businesses happening, multiple rural businesses happening. And, but we make it a point to take time away from all of that, even take time away from our 4 kids, to where, once every 2 weeks, we go on a date night. And then once or twice a year, we take a weekend away from everything. And then once every 2 years, we take a week-long vacation, just the 2 of us. And you can look at it and frame that however you will. But just doing those things to make sure you're on a steady regimen of maintenance, it's going to keep your cup full.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. I've never framed anything in my mind like that before. I've heard that.
Well,
that's cool.
I wish I could take credit for the rule of twos. I made up the rule of fives. I will take credit for that one, but I did not make up the rule of twos. I don't know who made it up, but I've heard it multiple places. But it's so important.
Mm-hmm.
Even thinking about your mental health as so in our last podcast, we talked a lot about what our goals were for the new year, both personally and in our business, and kind of our mindset as we go into the new year. And I was mine's really my mindset is more on the quarters versus the year. As I transition to being a business owner, that's what I focused on. But one is going to the gym, and it's every morning just getting up, leaving my house, going to the gym. And so many days, I almost did it today too, because I was thinking this podcast was recording at noon. And I'm dang, if I go, because I go and I do a workout, it takes an hour, and then I'm going to get back, shoot, that doesn't leave a lot of time and have to get some other calls in. I almost skipped it and moved it till the afternoon. And I'm no, because then I work all day. I never make time for it. You just have to go do it. And it was that internal thing with myself to be this is it's your time. It's the time for you, and my business can't run if I'm not healthy, and mentally, physically, all of it, right? Yeah. So even just putting it yourself first, that is hard. It's hard for
it's so hard. It's so hard because we're taught so long to be selfless. Mm-hmm. Right? If you're taking time for yourself, you're selfish.
Yeah.
And and selflessness is a very valiant mindset. I don't want to discount service to others, because that's really important. But again, it goes back to what I said just earlier. Like, you can't take care of anybody else if you aren't taking care of yourself, or anything else if you aren't taking care of yourself. You've got to make sure that you've got to make sure you're in the best, and that goes all the way up into your relationship with those closest to you. You're responsible for your feelings. You're responsible for how well you're doing. Nobody else is responsible for you but you. When you're an adult, and I struggle with that. I struggle really hard with that, especially like within my relationship with my wife. Like, I would love for her to make me feel better, but that'll never come to pass. Like, she will never make me feel better. I may look at things, my relationship with her, and make me feel, but it has to come from me. The act of feeling good has to come from yourself, and that's nobody else is going to give that to you.
Yeah, that's really powerful.
It really is. And it's, and I struggled with it for a really long time. Because there's this, I think you're all familiar with the concept of synergy, right? Two things, the sum of two things are greater than the sum of them separate. When you put them together, the whole concept of 1 + 1 = 3. Mm-hmm. And I'm talking about this in relationship again to my marriage, when we are so good ourselves, or try to be our best selves ourselves, the strength of our marriage is more than the sum of its parts. There's a certain bond and a certain energy that comes from that when we take care of ourselves first, and then we just are better in our relationships, not just with ourselves, but our relationships with our children, and our relationships with business contacts and people at work. And it's really powerful and it's a really interesting mind shift change whenever you can see that.
So we recently, I guess it wasn't so recently, but we've had Coach Kai on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you've had Kai on as well. And we talk a lot about mindset and how that like can change our lives, like literally change our lives. Like how Kai has lost over 100 pounds. Like, that's some life-changing stuff. And it all started with the mindset. And kind of like, whether you're going to call it like visualization or manifestation, whatever it is, just kind of like getting your mind right. I think that's been dubbed as like woo-woo for so long. Like, when does that stop being dubbed as that and moved into just being like powerful thinking or a healthy mindset?
So I think the biggest thing for me is, I can't say like when, but there's a certain point where I didn't care what anybody else thought about what I was doing, because it was none of their business. If it was helping me, no matter what it is, if it's helping you, it doesn't matter what it's labeled as, right? And I was too. I was a person who thought this kind of talk, you talk about energy and mindset and manifestation. I thought that was just all a bunch of nonsense. But when you actually put it into practice, it's not nonsense at all. In fact, it's the opposite of nonsense. And we talk about goals for the new year. My theme for the year is grounded. I'm trying to be more grounded. And like, when you start looking at those things like manifestation, like mindset, that's really truly the only way you get back to the core and get back to being grounded, being closer to our real lives. You start to find out how there's a lot of BS in the world, and when you stop, like when you start thinking more in those terms, more of those mindset and terms like that, you find out so much of this, so many things of life, especially the material things, are just are just noise, or just, they don't matter. And I think that's the biggest thing that's changed for me, is realizing what matters and what doesn't. And you can strip it down pretty far.
Yeah, I feel like for me anyways, like I feel like I can totally get stuck in like overwhelm, but when you're intentional and you realize, like you said, what matters, it's really actually really simple, but like it's hard to stay there and remember, like, this is what I need to remember, because you're not like, you want to see what's shiny, what's next,
Yeah. Oh, it's so hard to get distracted. I'm like that cat with the laser pointer. I'm over here and over here, and and it is hard to stay intentional, but and I still struggle with it, for sure. I still struggle with material things a lot, but I think I realize I'm at my happiest whenever I don't pay attention to those things, right? And I learn to be grateful for the things that are already here in front of me, and realize that with quite a bit to be grateful for.
I think like any business owner can feel that, right? Where it's like overwhelm and stress and so much. Like I just did it the other day on Instagram, and I was like, I need help. Somebody tell me, like, how do you take a day off? Like, because I can't seem to figure it out. Like, when do we get days off? And then like one hand, I feel ungrateful because it's like, I get it. Like I run my own business. I get to work for myself. I get to like make my own hours. So who am I to like complain about not having a day off? And then the other hand, be like, all of my clients, like I sold the last of my cattle last year. So I no longer own cattle. I don't have the everyday commitment that so many of my clients do. So I'm like, who am I to be like complaining about day off? Like,
Yeah.
Ranchers, farmers, we don't get days off. So that thing of like being overwhelmed about having like so much abundance in life, and then feeling crappy about like complaining about how much you have in life, like that's a weird place to be.
It is a weird place to be, and I'll say this, like now, like I make more money now than I ever thought I would in my life ever, but I still find myself wanting more, and it's a very like strange place to be, but I think but when I get back to like the core of things, like I have a roof over my head, I pay my bills, my kids are clothed and fed and have nice things, and what else really matters? Not much, not much.
Yeah. I love the conversation we had earlier about like how I feel like that we've all grown up in rural America, and how like mental health isn't something we talk about. But being a dad, how are you transitioning that conversation with your kids to talk about mental health and kind of like bring a new generation where we're positive about these things?
Yeah, so we don't beat around the bush around here, trying to think of how much I want to share, but still be respectful to my family. We're going through something right now, and I don't want to, just out of respect for our family, we're going through something right now as parents that I don't think would have happened with me growing up. On the take it back a generation. I'm so thankful that not only me, but also my wife has the mindset of not to sweep these things under the table and take care of them when we still have, when our kids are still impressionable. I didn't start paying attention to my mental health till I was out of college, right? And it's a lot harder to fix then. But if we can fix it early, if we can get impressionable, if we can, when these kids' minds are still evolving, and make it normal for them, it's going to set them up for life. It's going to set them up and their kids after, and and not try to be, for me as a dad, try not be okay with, not only am I a dad, I'm a dad of 4 boys. So like, there's a lot of testosterone around here, and it's hard sometimes to not think that you're being too easy on those boys. And what's funny is I don't ever regret being too easy on my kids. I regret only being too hard on them. I only regret being too mean to them or too harsh with them. I'm just trying to think right here. I don't think I've ever say, oh, I should have been harder on him. Mm-hmm. And that's a really interesting thing, because, I don't think we think that really, sometimes we say it out loud, oh, I was too easy on you, this. And really, I don't think I've ever been too easy on my kids. I've only been too hard on them. And, trying to keep that in the back of my mind. Again, it goes back to having that long-term perspective and, dealing with things, how they matter and how, who it matters to. Does it matter to the outside world, or does it matter to our little family? And that changes things a lot too. And again, it goes on to this, it goes back to that original thing about what's your mindset, what matters, what doesn't matter. And, you're able to clean it up and streamline things pretty fast that way. Sorry, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it does. Do you guys ever talk about I just think when I was growing up, it's okay, you exercise to be healthy and look a certain way. It was never exercise for your mental health, which I found to be huge. Mm-hmm. Like you said, after college, when I first left college, I started a career in TV news, and mm-hmm. I remember a particular story that I covered with an active shooter situation where I sat for 4 hours with the SWAT team, a very stressful type of thing. Right. And I had implemented good habits where I would go to the gym right after work. I packed my gym bag before I left. That's what I would do. And it just, I felt better. I know people say that when they go to the gym, oh, it feels better, but it really doesn't. I remember my boss taking me the next day to be are you okay? Did you do something? And I was like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I went to the gym just normal because I already had that habit, and I feel fine. I feel fine mm-hmm. with the day. I wish somebody would have talked to me about that when I was younger. Talk to me about how we can relieve stressors or kind of deal with things. I wish somebody would have talk to me about that when I was younger. Is that anything that you guys talk about?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, we talk about it. It's, we try to keep everything above the surface here. We try not to let anything go unsaid. We fail. Obviously we fail plenty. But we do, my wife, and I got to give a lot of, as far as parenting goes, my wife is she is such a good mother, and she's the mother these 4 boys need. It's no coincidence that we had 4 boys, because she's the perfect boy mom, because she's just so good with them and just plays with them and interacts with them. And she's so good at implementing routine. Whereas, if it was up to me, we'd eat dinner maybe at 4 o'clock, maybe at 10 o'clock. We go to sleep maybe at 8 o'clock, maybe at midnight. It would be such chaos around here. But she brings such an order. I think that's a big thing around here. So there's such an order. There's such a structure that is here in our household. And it's not because of me, because I'm one of the most unstructured people you'll naturally. I forced it's funny with the podcast, I forced myself to be much more structured, because as you guys know, you have to be. But I'm a naturally unstructured person. But she goes to, and we went on a trip. My kids went somewhere with another family. Carrie, I had to work, but Carrie went with another family and all the kids. And I really, especially our oldest, really saw what it's like, because they're not as structured as we are. And sometimes it seems restrictive. Sometimes it seems like, oh, we can't have fun because of structure, but I think like if you take that structure away, or like you see someone else without structure, you really appreciate that. And it's a good thing that they are able to take that structure for granted, because I don't want them to know a life without it.
Yeah.
So structure is a huge thing for us, maintaining good mental health around here as a family.
And your wife, Carrie, right,
Mhm.
she is a yoga instructor as well.
Yes.
And so yoga is a lot about, being one with yourself and inner peace. How, was she always a yoga instructor? Has that come with your mental health journey and your relationship?
Yeah. That's been her own kind of thing. Obviously I support her so much in that, because it's been, again, it's been, her working on herself has spilled over into our family. And she's actually there tonight. She has a beginner's yoga class on Tuesday night, and then she's doing actually a vision board party tonight for people who can come in and do their vision boards for this year. And just so many cool things that she does. And it's been how she's been able to improve her own mental health, because she's a very anxious, introverted person. She's the exact, I'm anxious too, but I'm more hyper. She's more withdrawn. She's an introvert. I'm an extrovert. As you guys can tell, I talk and you can't get me to shut up. And it's been so good for her, and so good for us as a family. I think she started the yoga journey actually after I started my podcast. She's a nurse. She was a nurse. We met through the hospital. She was finishing nursing school. I was finishing pharmacy school, and she got so burnt out on nursing because it's just it's hard. It's a hard profession, but she still wanted something that was uniquely hers, and that's when she found yoga and found the philosophies within Eastern religion. The Eastern, obviously we're still, very much Western, traditional Judeo-Western, have those values, but she's found so much wisdom and help in the Eastern religions like Hinduism, which was taught to her through yoga, and being able to apply it to our own lives. There's just been such a peace that comes with it. Being very peaceful, like her approach to life and to parenting and to being a wife, has just become much more peaceful, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that so much.
How big is your town where she's teaching yoga? What's population?
Somewhere just north of 3,000 people.
And it's like crazy to me to think about a town that size having a yoga instructor who also does like vision board. Like that didn't happen where I grew up. Like,
no,
you know what I mean? Like I think it would happen now if somebody offered it. Yeah. Like if somebody offered it, I think tons of people would go. So I don't know if it's like, again, like more people talking about it, social media, the internet, like whatever. But it's like, oh man, it's just so cool to think about like what's out there as business owners, how many opportunities are out there, and then how willing people are to be open to different ventures and different things.
So, and here's my thought on this. When you talk about rural living, unfortunately the rural population is declining, or it has been a steady decline for quite a number of decades now. But we are starting to see people shifting from urban to rural, and seeing that it's a possibility to live rurally. And for me, I'm excited, because that means that our rural economies hopefully will thrive. But what we have to realize is we have to start as rural entrepreneurs, we have to start offering services or finding services that someone may want in an urban area, right? Take, for instance, a yoga studio, and someone who does vision boards. That doesn't happen in a lot of rural communities, right? But if we want our rural areas to grow, that's the kind of stuff that I'm not saying just that specifically, that just happens to be what we're doing. But a lot of people doing those little things like that, that's what's going to make our rural economy blossom, is trying to provide services that are available in an urban area, but still have that kind of rural vibe to them, rural mindset to them. That's my thought anyway. That's my vision for it.
Not even the economy, but the quality of life.
Exactly.
For everybody,
which is more important. With a good quality of life comes a good economy.
Mm-hmm. That's some the basis of my business and this podcast even is helping people to see you can start a business. You cutting stuff out of magazines and posting it on a poster, there's a business. Just so many things that hopefully that's what we're doing. That's our mission, helping people just kind of see that there could be so many things. So I love to hear that that's what Carrie does. And I like seeing you guys on social media and the things that you post. Obviously the whole conversation of mental health and mindfulness, I think is a welcome conversation, whatever year it is, beginning of the year, whatever. So I don't know, I've loved the conversation for sure.
Yeah, me too. And it's it's an important one to be had, because not everybody's comfortable having it. So it's important for people to have it, sometimes where people can just listen to it. And maybe it relates to them, even in silently. That's important too.
For sure.
I think I have one more thing, Rach. Do you have any other questions that you wanted to ask?
Shoot, Brenna, go for it.
Okay, the last thing that I kind of wanted to go or to talk about, which I think we might have hit on already, but recently you had a post, Jason, where you shared your pill, right? And it was, can't even think of the author's name now, who you said I was inspired by.
Mel Robbins.
Yes, Mel Robbins, to talk about this and post this. What has been your experience of being I work in healthcare, so I know that side of it. I'm also a rancher. I understand all the stresses we have. Do you ever feel like you know it all, or how do you kind of I guess, how do you share stuff while also dealing with your own, mental health journey and being on both sides of it?
You just got to get on, you got to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm way far away from knowing it all. It's the Dunning-Kruger Effect is in very high, I'm very aware of that. Do you guys know what the Dunning-Kruger Effect is?
I've heard of it.
It's basically, and I'm gonna butcher it here, but you think you know a lot about something until you start to dig into it, and then you realize you don't know anything. So it's almost like the more you find out about something, the less you know about it, type of thing. And that's how I am with pretty much everything I do. The more you get involved with it, the less you actually realize, the less of an expert you really are. So, basically I am just trying to have I'm having a human experience, and I'm sharing that human experience because I know it's relatable. And that's one thing I know I do well is I'm relatable. I think people get me. I think people understand me and can see where I'm coming from on things. And I'm very blessed to have that as a gift, and I'm hopefully utilizing it very well. And the fact that again, it goes back to people, maybe they can't say the things out loud, or they don't feel comfortable saying the things out loud that I was sharing, but maybe they can, by proxy through me. And I'll take this. You brought up that post about my pill. That's been very, people have just been so positive with it. And a person who lives in our hometown told Carrie that something had happened with her family, and she had started having to take medication, and she felt so much shame around it. She felt so terrible about it, and people made her feel shameful for doing it. And but she saw that post, and it just it gave her just a little bit of hope. We're like, oh, okay, somebody knows what I'm going through. And that's what I'm trying to do. I am at a point right now where I'm very strong. And by saying that, I mean, it's very hard to knock me off. I care very little about what anybody says anymore. Now, I wasn't always like that. It's been a long journey to get here. In fact, I've been hurt by some people very close to me on my journey to get here, and that sucks. But it's made me stronger, and now I'm very happy that I'm at a point where I can share things and not care where other people aren't in a place. And I love the fact that I am maybe able to take the burden off of a lot of people.
I love that.
I feel like that's very powerful, because I can totally relate to when you say, maybe there's a lot of people who don't know how to say it, but you can put it in words that then they can use in their own lives or try. So I feel like that's super important. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. I love the conversation. Where can people follow you or learn more about what you do? Where can our listeners find you?
Sure. Everything. Did I even say the name of my podcast on here? I don't know. I've been just talking, and that's terrible. My friend Janet Person, she would just kill me if she realized this. Because she told me very young, don't ever not say the name of your podcast so many times, because that's you got to get the word out there. But the name of my podcast is Ag State of Mind. I can give credit to my wife for that name. It's a great name.
Yes, it is.
I wish I could take credit for it, but unfortunately it was all her. You can find me anywhere on social media, Ag State of Mind, and then wherever you get your podcast, Ag State of Mind. We release an episode every Monday. Sometimes if we get busy, it doesn't come out till Tuesday, but almost every Monday you can look for a new episode of Ag State of Mind.
Awesome.
And real quick, I also have started, it's kind of a series within my podcast, but I think it's hopefully going to go to its own podcast, and it's called the Ranching Side Hustle Podcast. And I think it's really cool as for your listeners, as a lot of times I think we feel shame especially when we're ranchers, but we don't do it full time, and people almost poke fun of us as us being the quote unquote hobby farmers, which is a term I take a huge offense to. So my friend Tyler Keckley and I, we reframed that a little bit and called it a ranching side hustle, where it's still an important business, but it's obviously not the full thing that we do, but we still want to give it the full attention. So you're going to look for that about once a month starting off, and then hopefully it evolves into a podcast all of its own.
Yeah, I like that. That's awesome. I'm going to look out for that.
Yeah, very excited. We released our first episode last week. Yeah, last week. The first episode of the year was the first episode of the Ranching Side Hustle podcast. So we're very excited for it.
Awesome.
We have all kinds of ideas.
I love it. Awesome. Well, thank you. We appreciate it. We love the conversation.
Thank you. I appreciate it too.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Rural Rundown podcast.
Thanks for listening. You can always find us on social media at the Rural Rundown.
And if you really liked this episode, we would totally love it if you gave us a review and gave us a little rating.
It would mean so much to us. And for more small town roots and business savvy, catch us on the next one.